Okay, so let's hold up and let people join us and then we'll begin. Fine. Hi, Asma. Class. Well, you people are pretty slow to join in. I'm great. What about you? Okay. Well, Asma, we'll have to wait for a minute or so and let our other friends also come in. Fine. So then we'll get going. Okay. Well, okay. Hi, Tasil. Welcome to the class. Quite late, huh? Did you have difficulty logging in or what? Okay, looks like you are not responding. Anyways. So... Okay, so let's get moving and let's quickly begin where we left in our last class. So in our last class, we were talking about pineal gland, right? And I told you that the secretion of the pineal gland is melatonin. And this melatonin is released by the pineal gland in response to dark. Fine. No, that's all right. I was just hoping for your response, but it came too late. You are even late to respond to me. So this melatonin is released during the dark time. Fine. And this induces sleep. Okay, that's all right. And it is responsible for inducing sleep. And melatonin also affect our metabolism and it decreases our skin pigmentation. So if melatonin is released, it will go to the melanocytes through the blood supply and it will tell the melanocytes to concentrate the melanin at one place. Fine. So if the melanin is concentrated at one point in the cytoplasm, the whole melanocyte would look fairer. Fine. Or would look lighter in appearance. And thus, our skin tone will be light. Fine. Hi, Christina. Welcome to the class. So I'm just discussing the effect of melatonin on skin pigmentation. And melatonin is also known to slow down our reproductive activities. So if a lot of melatonin is released, our reproductive activities slow down. Fine. The secretion of androgens from our gonads is slowed down. The development of sperm, the development of ova is slowed down. Fine. So these are some of the effects of melatonin, which is released by the pineal gland. So after melatonin and discussing about thyroid and parathyroid gland, the next gland which is there in my list is thymus. Hi Nivasini, welcome. And thymus is situated just over my heart. So if this is my heart region, just at the top of my heart, I have the thymus situated. So you can see thymus is situated here and it is a bilobe structure. It consists of two lobes, one right lobe, one left lobe, and it is primarily responsible for a release of a hormone in our blood supply. Okay, that's all right. I am used to it now. People are turning up late. So this is going to release a hormone called as thymosin in my blood supply. And this thymosin is going to stimulate the development of my WBCs. Fine. Okay. Looks like everyone is suffering with a network issue today. That's all right. So it is going to simulate the development of my WBC, my body. So as a person grows older, so once I finished my 18 years of age, my thymus has reduced in size. Fine. And in adolescence, it is quite large in size. And as we grow older, the thymus keeps on reducing in size. Okay. So after thymus, the main important endocrine gland is the adrenal gland. The word renal here refers to kidney. So in biology, anything related to kidney is referred to as renal. Fine. Anything related to lung is referred to as pulmonary. Pulmonary. Anything related to heart is referred to as cardiac. Anything related to my liver is referred to as hepatic. Fine. So here the word adrenal means in front of my kidney. So the adrenal gland is set of my kidney, or in fact on top of my kidney. And as in biology, it is customary, the outer portion of any organ is termed as cortex, and the inner portion of any organ is termed as medulla. So here I have colored the medulla with a red color and the cortex with a yellow color. So I am talking of two distinct regions of adrenal gland, cortex and medulla. And why only adrenal I have divided into these two portions? So that is also important. Fine. So I have just divided adrenal in these two portions, not every organ. Why is it so? Let us see. So in case of adrenal gland, okay, so my adrenal cortex, in fact, let me turn back to the last slide. So my adrenal cortex is stimulated by the adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is coming from the anterior pituitary into the blood supply, and it is going to stimulate the cells of my adrenal cortex. Fine. And ACTH is released from my pituitary gland in response to CRH from the hypothalamus. Corticotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus will tell my pituitary gland to release ACTH, and in response to that, the ACTH will be released in the blood supply and it will stimulate the cells of the adrenal cortex. The adrenal cortex is further divided into three portions. So the outermost region of the adrenal cortex is called as zona glomerulosa. Glomerulosa. And the region inner to it is called as zona fasciculata. And the region inner to zona fasciculata is known as zona reticularis. So these are the three zones of my adrenal cortex. And why I am talking about these three zones of my adrenal cortex? So my whole of adrenal cortex is the only portion of the adrenal gland which is stimulated by ACTH. Adrenal medulla is never stimulated by ACTH. It is the adrenal cortex only. And when adrenal cortex is stimulated by the ACTH, the zona glomerulosa will release hormones called as mineralocorticoid. Mineralocorticoids. And as the name suggests, they are going to promote the increase of mineral content in my blood. So my blood plasma will have high sodium concentration and high potassium concentration when mineralocorticoids are released in my blood. And how their concentration will be increased? Basically, from my kidney tubules, more and more of sodium potassium salt will be reabsorbed. Fine. So that my blood sodium and potassium concentration goes up. So my kidney tubules will excrete very little amount of sodium or potassium salts. And as such, the concentration of sodium and potassium salts will rise up in my blood. Fine. And one of the major mineralocorticoids which is released in case of human beings is termed as aldosterone. So aldosterone is one of the mineralocorticoids released by zona glomerularis. Then zona fasciculata is responsible for releasing glucocorticoids. The word gluco refers something to do with glucose. Fine. So these glucocorticoids, when they are released in the blood supply by zona fasciculata, they are going to increase the glucose content in my blood. Fine. Or in my blood plasma. They are going to cause lipolysis. That means breakdown of fat in my body so that more of glucose is released in my blood. It is going to also cause gluconeogenesis, synthesis of glucose from substances other than carbohydrate. Fine. That will also happen in the liver. It will basically, it will decrease my inflammation. So if I am suffering with inflammation in any part of my body, so it will decrease inflammation. So these are some of the primary actions of my glucocorticoids. Fine. So by all of these actions, its primary goal is to raise my glucose concentration in the blood. Some of the examples of glucocorticoids are cortisone, and cortisol. So these are some of the examples of glucocorticoids. And after the glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, the zona reticularis. Hi Smriti, welcome to the class. Zona reticularis is also responsible for releasing some of the hormones in my blood supply, and they are androgenic steroids. And these steroid hormones are released both in case of males and females, and they are of two types. They are female sex hormones as well as male sex hormone. So that means my zona reticularis of my adrenal gland. Okay, Smriti. Well, you have missed a lot. I'm almost done with the adrenal gland. Fine. So my zona reticularis of my adrenal gland is going to release the female sex hormones in me as well as the male sex hormone. Fine. But the amount of these hormones released in my blood supply is very, very less. Fine. So that's why there is no impact of female hormones being produced in my blood supply. All right. By zona reticularis. Oh, well, I'm pretty good. So I'm quick. I am almost done with the function of my adrenal cortex. So my adrenal cortex is producing these three kind of hormones in response to ACTH from the anterior pituitary. Fine. Now, my adrenal medulla is not at all stimulated by ACTH. So my adrenal medulla, whenever I am nervous, whenever I am tensed, my adrenal medulla will get a nerve impulse. And in response to this nerve impulse, my adrenal medulla will secrete adrenaline in case of animals and noradrenaline in case of humans. The functions of adrenaline and noradrenaline. It is going to release a lot of glucose in my blood. Fine. It is going to make my pupils dilate, my heartbeat grow faster, my blood pressure will rise, my breathing rate will rise, my hairs on the skin will rise up, and I am all alert to either fight with my enemy or to flee away from him. Fine. So it is basically called as a stress hormone, and it is released so that we are ready and we are prepared to fight with an eventuality. Fine. There are other names for adrenaline. Adrenaline is also called as epinephrine. And noradrenaline is called as norepinephrine. Okay, so that is about my adrenal gland as such. And after my adrenal gland, my next gland that I'm going to talk of is pancreas. And we all know the location of pancreas in case of human beings. So if this is my stomach, so just below my stomach starts my small intestine. And at the junction of my small intestine and my stomach, I have the leafy pancreas. Fine. I have this leafy pancreas, and pancreas has got ducts. And through this ducts, it is pouring pancreatic juice. So the pancreatic juice is being poured in the pancreatic duct. And the pancreatic duct joins a duct coming from the liver, and it empties in the small intestine. So pancreas is pouring the pancreatic juices with the help of a duct or a tube into the small intestine. So therefore, my pancreas is acting as an exocrine gland, right? And the pancreatic juice contains a lot of digestive enzymes. Then, coming down to the endocrine portion of my pancreas. So if this is my pancreas, leaf-like structure, fine. Throughout my pancreas, there are groups of cells. And these groups of cells, loose groups of cells throughout my pancreas, are termed as, yes, absolutely correct. They are termed as islets of Langerhans. And these islets of Langerhans contain two kinds of cells. Alpha cells as well as beta cells. The alpha cells are responsible for releasing a hormone, glucagon. Fine. And when glucagon is released into the blood supply, my glucose concentration in the blood will rise up. So, if there is a less of glucose in my blood, my pancreas, islets of Langerhans cells will sense that, and the alpha cells will produce glucagon. Glucagon is going to shoot up my blood glucose level. Fine. And if there is a lot of glucose in my blood, my beta cells will release insulin. And insulin is going to ensure that the extra glucose that is there in my blood plasma goes back into my fat tissues, into my liver. It is stored as glycogen. Into my muscles, it is stored as glycogen, right? And glucose deposits. So it is going to decrease my blood glucose concentration. So that is the endocrine role of my pancreas. Fine. And after this, okay, I'm going to talk of my last. Okay, so functions of pancreas, it releases glucagon and insulin. Glucagon is called as hyperglycemic hormone. Hyper means increase, right? Glycemic means glucose. So it is going to increase my glucose concentration. It helps in maintaining the normal blood glucose level when my glucose level drops too below. Insulin stimulates hepatocytes. So insulin is telling my liver cells and my fat cells pick up the extra glucose from the blood. And thus it helps in bringing my glucose concentration down. After that, I'm going to talk of my gonads. So gonads are also called as primary sex organs. So they are also termed as primary sex organs. And why do we call them so? Because my primary sex organs are the only organs in my body that contain germ cells. And germ cells are diploid, but these are the only cells in my body that will undergo meiosis to form. Also, they are the endocrine glands. So testes found in human males secrete androgen and mainly testosterone in response to LH. So when LH is coming from the pituitary gland, my testes will start secreting testosterone, and the LH is secreted from the pituitary gland in response to GnRH from the hypothalamus. Fine. So following are the functions of androgen. They regulate the development, maturation, and function of the male accessory sex organs. They play a stimulatory role in spermatogenesis. So testosterone will help in the manifestation of secondary sexual characteristics of male, like the male pitched voice, appearance of facial hair, right? Male pattern of body hair, right? And then broad chest, broad shoulders, high bone density, right? More muscle, and you can say rough skin compared to female. So all this, well, Christina, that is secreted in very low amounts and generally by the adrenal cortex. Fine. So zona reticularis of the adrenal cortex will secrete testosterone in case of females, but in negligible amounts. The amount is so low that it doesn't cause much of an effect. Okay. So let's move on and let's talk of the ovary. So ovary is another primary sex organ, and it is found in case of human females, and it produces the ovum, the haploid female gamete. So hormones produced by the ovary are estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen is produced in response to Smriti, well, dear, you'll have to basically watch back the recordings, because I have a lot of things to cover up. Once I'm done, I can repeat the stuff that you have lost. Fine. So please bear with me. So estrogen is released in response to FSH, and progesterone is released in response to LH, and both of these are released from the anterior pituitary in response to GnRH from the hypothalamus. Fine. So estrogen is going to promote the development of some structures inside the ovary. So estrogen is responsible for secondary female characteristics, like the development of breast. Fine. Female type body pattern, female type hair distribution, softer skin, right? Widening of hips. All these are occurring due to the presence of estrogen. Okay, Smriti. See, I am just covering the second gonad. I will cover the testes once again. Fine. So just hold on. So that is the role of estrogen. Fine. So it plays many roles, such as the development of ovarian follicles and the development of mammary glands. So what do I mean by development of ovarian follicles? Let me explain that. So in case of human beings, the female has got 2 ovaries, and each ovary contain a circular bunch of cells inside it. Many such circular bunches of cells, right? And each circular bunch is made up of many layers of cell, and this is called as an ovarian follicle. And inside the ovarian follicle, we have the ovum, which is sitting and which is going to develop. Fine. So inside each ovary of the female, there are hundreds and thousands of ovarian follicle. Fine. So their development is promoted by estrogen. Now, progesterone's main function is basically to support pregnancy. If the female becomes pregnant, then progesterone is going to ensure that the pregnancy stays. The mammary gland produces milk, right? And milk producing structures. So that are found more in the mammary gland in response to progesterone. So that is the role of progesterone. Smriti, I hope the female gonad is clear. I can move over to the male one again, the testis. Okay. So the testis is the primary sex organ of the male. It is responsible for the production of male gamete, that is the sperms, right? And the male sex hormone testosterone, which is released in response to LH from the anterior pituitary, and LH is released in response to GnRH, right? So testosterone is basically causing the development of secondary sexual characteristics in males, like the appearance of beard and mustaches, male-like body hair distribution, broadening of shoulders, widening of chest, more muscle mass, right, denser bone, high, low-pitched voice, and a hard voice. So all these features are there in the male due to the release of testosterone. Fine. And it also promotes the development of accessory sex organs like penis and others. Fine. And it also promotes the development of sperms. So that is the role of testosterone released by the testes of the male. Okay. I think that is enough of story. Fine. Now let me come down to a little bit of basics regarding my endocrine glands. So how do these hormones function? Right. Let us learn about that. Excuse me. So let us learn about that. So in short, I will say, I have a gland which I'm indicating with G. Thank you. And this gland is going to produce some hormone, which I'm indicating with H. And this hormone is going to enter my blood capillaries, which are near my gland. And through blood supply, this hormone is circulated throughout my body. Fine. But it affects only those parts of my body which are responsive to it. So every hormone does not affect whole body, right? Like TSH affects only thyroid gland. Although it is secreted in the blood and it will revolve throughout the body, but it will affect thyroid gland only. So why only thyroid gland is stimulated by it? Why not the other organs or the other parts or the other cells of my body? Let us learn about it. So this hormone will travel throughout my body, and the target tissue have got special kind of cells which have got either on their plasma membrane. So cells have got on their plasma membrane some protein receptors. So the cells of the target tissue have got protein receptors present on its plasma membrane, and when the hormone comes over here and bind to these receptors, a signal is delivered to these cells internally through the receptors, and the cells will do some function. So that means only the cells of my target organ are having the protein receptors on their plasma membrane to bind to the hormone, and the cells of the rest of my body are not having those protein receptors on their plasma membrane. Fine. Another thing that could have happened over here, the cells may not have the protein receptors on their plasma membrane, but they could have intracellular molecular receptors. So some hormones are capable of permeating through the plasma membrane. So they will directly permeate through the plasma membrane and bind with their receptor molecules inside the cell. Fine. And thus activate this cell. So both the things can happen. And when and where which thing will happen, we'll discuss that. So that is how my cells of the target organ become sensitive to the presence of the hormone. So only the cell of my target organ will have intracellular receptors or extracellular receptor. Fine. So the blue receptor is the intracellular receptor. Intracellular receptor. And the red receptor, the protein receptor that I had shown, is membrane bound receptor. It is present on the plasma membrane of the cell itself. Fine. So we have got these two kind of receptor molecules. Okay. So we'll discuss more about it and let's move forward as the things are. So what are hormones? I think all of you can define it for me now very quickly. This shouldn't be a trouble for us. Come on, Smriti. Come on, Asma. Tehseen, come on, man. Secreted by glands. Okay, thanks a lot for that water break. And let me move ahead and catch you all. So, hormones are some chemical messengers which are released by the endocrine glands immediately into the extracellular space outside of the endocrine gland. Fine. And from the extracellular space, the hormone or the chemical messenger is picked up and is delivered to the target site, where it tells the cells of the target site to do a particular job. Fine. So that is a hormone. Now, generally, most of my hormones which are released in my body are of two kinds. So they are generally proteins or steroids. So those hormones which are protein include your GnRH, your growth hormone releasing hormone, your TRH, your MSH, your prolactin inhibitory hormone, your prolactin, fine, FSH, LH. So there are many insulin, glucagon, thyroid hormones. These are all protein hormones. Fine. Okay. Coming down to a list of steroid hormones, it includes your aldosterone, your cortisol, cortisone, estrogen, which can be written beginning with E or O. Fine. Testosterone, your progesterone. So, your steroid hormones are basically acting like a fat. So, they are fatty in nature or like a fat molecule. Fine. And they are hydrophobic. They hate water. Just like your fats separate out from water, so they hate water. And your proteinaceous hormones are hydrophilic. They love water. Hydrophilic. and your proteinaceous hormones are not able to cross the plasma membrane of the cell because the plasma membrane of the cell is made up of lipid bilayer. Lipid means fat. So 2 layers of fat molecules are there which are forming my plasma membrane, and my protein molecules are soluble in water. They love water, so they cannot cross the plasma membrane. So therefore, the receptors of the protein hormones will be membrane-bound receptors. So the receptors for the protein hormones are present on the plasma membrane of the cell, whereas your hydrophobic hormones, steroid hormones, they are fatty in nature, and thus they can easily cross the bilipid layer, and the receptors for them are intracellular. Fine. So I hope this much is clear. Boys and girls, are you there with me? Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so let's get moving and let's talk a little bit more about hormones. So the first hormone was discovered by Ernest Stilling and William Bellis somewhere in the year 1903, and the first hormone to be discovered was secretin. It was called as secretin. Hormones are the organic chemicals produced by the body which are released in the blood supply. They are produced in very tiny amounts, not in huge quantities. They act as intercellular messenger from one cell of the gland to the next cell of the target organ. Fine, they are acting as messenger molecules between the cells. So that's why intercellular messenger. They are transported by the circulatory system to the target organ located generally away from the site of circulation. Fine, for regulating behavior and physiology. So they are secreted and they will go to the target organ, which is generally away from the site of the secretion. Fine, generally the target organ is far away from the place where the hormone is secreted. Okay, hormones are generally of two kinds, proteinaceous hormones or steroid hormones. And functions of hormones, we all know. Growth hormone promotes growth. Sex hormones control our sexual maturity. Endocrine cells present in the alimentary canal regulate the process of digestion. So there are some hormones involved even in digestion, including secretin. Fine. So where are these hormones produced from and how they help in digestion? That is something you will learn later, not right now. Hormones regulate various metabolic processes. Example, thyroxine or T4 or tetraiodothyronine. Hormones regulate water and electrolyte balance. Example, your aldosterone. They also regulate your blood glucose concentration. Example, your insulin and glucagon. Fine. And then, mechanism of hormone action. So, hormones induce their effect after binding to a receptor present in the target cell. Fine. Hormones and receptor are specific for each other. Hormone receptors can be of two types. Membrane-bound receptors interact with hydrophilic hormones. We have learned that. And intracellular receptors interact with lipophilic or fat-loving hormones. Fine. So, hormones, after forming a complex with their receptor, induce their target genes to produce a desired effect. So, this is something I will tell you in detail, how the hormone is bringing a change after affecting or binding to its receptor. Okay. So, mechanism of action of peptide hormone is what we are seeing here. So, you can see a peptide hormone or a proteinaceous hormone binding to its receptor molecule on the plasma membrane. And once this molecule binds to the receptor on its plasma membrane, the receptor signals the inside of the cell to produce another messenger molecule inside the cell. So the inside machinery of the cell produces another second messenger molecule, and this is generally, in case of many cells, cyclic AMP, cyclic adenosine monophosphate, which is acting as a second messenger. Fine. And this second messenger will activate one protein, and this protein will activate another protein, and so on and so forth. Many proteins will be activated in a series, and finally one of them will simply somehow go inside the cell or will bind to the receptor molecule present here on the nuclear membrane. And inside the nuclear membrane, a new messenger molecule is produced. And this messenger molecule will bind to a gene and will activate a gene. And the gene will cause a particular function to happen in the cell. Fine. So that means when your peptide hormone binds to the receptor, it activates the inner machinery of the cell to produce a chain of molecular reactions, which ultimately leads to a molecule binding to a particular gene inside the nucleus of the cell, and the gene is activated and the cell does one function. Fine. So like when TRH comes to anterior pituitary cell, then TRH activates the anterior pituitary cell and activates its gene to produce TSH. So the gene for producing TSH is activated. Fine. So that is how my peptide hormone will work. I hope this is clear to everyone. Any query over here? Let's move on. So mechanisms of steroid hormone. Molecule, and this complex will activate some molecules or will directly go inside the nucleus and will bind to the gene and will activate the gene. Fine. So this is how my steroid hormone will function. So it will bind to a gene, it will activate it, and it will do some function. Intracellular and intercellular is same. See, the word intra means within. And the word inter means between. So if I say intracellular, it is within the cell. So the intracellular receptors are within the cell. And if I am saying the word intercellular, it is between two cells. So my hormones are intercellular messengers. They carry the message of the gland cell to the target cell. Okay. So they are intercellular messengers. Whereas I have intracellular receptors. So why peptide hormones are unable to cross the cell membrane, whereas steroid hormones can easily pass through? I think I have discussed it, because peptide hormones are hydrophilic and your plasma membrane is hydrophobic. So only it will allow the hydrophobic steroid hormones to pass through it. Only oil can mix with oil. Water cannot mix with the oil, right? Okay. Now another question comes up over here. In the last 15 minutes, we must quickly discuss it over and get rid of this topic. So, how the secretion of hormone is regulated? So basically, how does my pancreas get to know that there is too much of glucose in my blood and I must secrete insulin? So what is that behavior? How does it come to know about that? So basically, and my pancreas is getting a regular feedback. And how it is getting a feedback, let us check it. So let us say my glucose level in the blood is very high. So the beta cells of my pancreas have got some receptor molecules on the plasma membrane. And these receptor molecules can sense a lot of glucose in the environment. So they will signal and they will start producing insulin. So insulin is produced. And when insulin is produced, insulin will bring down the glucose level. So the glucose level is brought down. So the positive influence that was causing the beta cells to secrete insulin is gone now, right? So the insulin secretion has actually caused an effect of lowering the glucose level, and thus a negative influence goes to beta cell. That glucose is not binding to your receptors. So stop producing insulin. So insulin production is stopped. Fine. So this is a feedback which the beta cells are getting, that the glucose level has come down due to the secretion of insulin. So stop producing insulin. So this negative feedback which the beta cell got due to reduction in glucose is called as a negative feedback loop. So this is a negative feedback due to which insulin secretion has stopped. Fine. So that is a feedback mechanism. So the quantity of hormone and how much and when it should be released are controlled by feedback mechanism. So the feedback mechanism is basically a loop system that responds to the changes either in the same or the opposite direction. Fine. It produces a signal that either stimulates or inhibits a process. So basically, my negative feedback of insulin is, let me just show you. So I have a gland, and this gland receives some stimuli, and that stimuli leads the gland or makes the gland produce a hormone, and this hormone brings some change in my body, and due to this change, the stimuli is kicked off. Fine. So the gland is not getting the signal. So earlier it was given a positive signal by the stimuli. Now you have removed the positive signal. Fine. And your gland becomes inactive again. It is not producing hormone. So the stimulus is gone. So the gland is not producing hormone. So this is negative feedback. And then I can have a positive feedback. The gland is producing a hormone. The hormone is causing some change in my body. This change increases the stimulus. So it makes the stimulus even stronger, grows stronger. And when the stimulus grows stronger, my gland will use more of hormone. It will bring more of change. And it will stimulate more of stimulus. So this is a positive feedback. Okay. Now let me quickly give you an example of a positive feedback loop. So the positive feedback loop is this one over here. Let us say I have an infant. A baby starts crying and it starts suckling its mother's breast. So suckling of breast is the stimulus here. And suckling of breast produces nerve impulses, right? The mothers can sense that their breast is being suckled, right? A nerve impulse goes from the breast to the brain. The brain will sense the nerve impulse and will send a signal to hypothalamus. The hypothalamus in turn will send a signal to the pituitary. The pituitary gland in turn will release oxytocin. Oxytocin will in turn go to the muscles of breast. And cause their contraction. Contraction of the muscles of the breast will lead to release of milk. From the breast. Release of milk will increase the suckling of breast by the infant. And more of nerve impulse will go. More of impulse will go to the brain. More will go to the hypothalamus. More will go to the pituitary. And more of oxytocin will be released. More contraction of the muscles of breast will occur. More milk will be released out. And this will further promote the suckling of breast by the infant. Fine. So the stimulus is growing stronger and stronger, and you can see its effect on the pituitary. So it is affecting the pituitary indirectly, giving it a stronger and stronger impulse from the brain, and more of oxytocin is being released. So this loop will continue, and this is a positive feedback. And when the baby's stomach is full, the baby will withdraw the suckling. All of a sudden, it will start slowing down because the baby is getting its feed proper. Its stomach is nearing full. Fine. So it doesn't want much of a milk now. It is satisfied. So the impulse goes down and the whole thing collapses. In positive, you have to remove the stimuli. And you remove the stimuli and the impulse collapses. So that is my positive feedback. Is this clear to everyone? Smriti. Okay. Was it interesting or was it boring? I guess pretty boring. Everyone was silent. Well, it was good. Okay. Well, we need to do something to make this class more interesting, right? You guys remain too silent in the class. And that is what pinches me. Yeah, it is new and fascinating. Right, I know. So that is it for today. Fine. So I think I can wind off, and probably you guys can come and revise it next time, and we can play some quiz. Okay. So good night and God bless you all. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye.